The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a massive dome under the artificial stars. Hundreds of alien beings filled the curved seats, their strange forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had tentacles that moved, like snakes, others had crystal bodies that sparkled in the light, and many had features that no human mind could easily understand. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the center of it all, his blue uniform looking plain and simple compared to the flowing robes and gleaming armor worn by the alien representatives. Next to him, Captain Lisa Carter held a small device that projected images of Earth's warships into the air above them. The images showed sturdy metal ships with thick hulls and large engines. They looked heavy and old compared to the sleek alien vessels that floated around the hall like works of art. The human ships had no glowing parts, no shimmering shields, and no weapons that looked like they came from a dream. "These are our ships," Admiral Morrison said in a clear voice that echoed through the hall. "The USS Denver, the USS Phoenix, the USS Miami, and 9 others like them. They have served us well for many years." A sound like laughter filled the air, but it came from creatures that had no mouths like humans did. The Zephyrian ambassador, a tall being with 4 arms and skin like blue metal, made clicking sounds with parts of his face that moved like scissors. "Admiral Morrison," the Zephyrian said, his voice coming through a translator device. "Surely these are not the ships you plan to use in real battles. They look like they belong in a museum, not in space combat." More sounds of amusement came from all around the hall. A creature that looked like a walking tree made rustling noises. Another being that seemed to be made of flowing water gurgled in what might have been laughter. Captain Carter kept her face calm, but her hands gripped the device a little tighter. She had flown these ships and knew what they could do. But looking around at all the alien faces showing amusement and disbelief, she understood why they were laughing. The Carillion delegate stood up, his crystal body catching the light and throwing rainbow colors across the nearby seats. When he spoke, his voice sounded like music, but not pleasant music. It was the kind of music that made fun of something. "Honored humans," the Carillion said. "We appreciate your desire to help protect the outer worlds. But these ships you show us still use chemical rockets. They still fire solid bullets. Our children play with toys more advanced than your weapons." The hall erupted in louder sounds of amusement. Beings who had never agreed on anything seemed to come together in their shared opinion that human technology was a joke. A small, furry creature with too many eyes raised one of its 6 hands. "Perhaps the humans could help us by carrying supplies to our real warships. Their cargo holds look big enough for that." This brought even more laughter. Admiral Morrison felt his jaw muscles get tight, but he had been a diplomat long enough to keep his temper under control. Captain Carter, however, was a fighter pilot first and a diplomat second. Her face was starting to show her anger. "Our ships may look old," Captain Carter said, stepping forward, "but they work. They have never failed us in battle." The Zephyrian ambassador made more clicking sounds. "What battles, Captain? Humans have been part of the Galactic Council for only 50 years. You have fought pirates and smugglers. We are talking about real enemies. The Vexhi Empire has ships that can crack planets in half. The Dark Fleet has weapons that can destroy suns. Your metal boxes with their simple guns would last about 5 seconds against real threats." An alien that looked like a giant insect buzzed its wings in agreement. "The Vexhi laugh at plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. What would they think of humans throwing rocks at them?" "They are not rocks," Admiral Morrison said firmly. "They are precision-guided kinetic projectiles with—" "Fancy words for bullets," interrupted a slug-like creature that spoke through slime bubbles. "Very, very old bullets." The mockery continued for another hour. Each alien representative seemed to want to add their own comment about how primitive and useless human ships were. They talked about their own vessels with pride, describing weapons that bent space and time, shields that could stop black holes, and engines that could travel between dimensions. Through it all, Admiral Morrison and Captain Carter stood quietly and took the insults. But they were not alone. Around the edges of the Great Hall, other human officers watched and listened. Commander Steve Walsh leaned against a wall, his arms crossed and his face showing no emotion. Lieutenant Commander Amy Peterson stood near a window that looked out at the space station's docking bays, where alien ships of incredible beauty floated like jewels. When the laughter finally died down, the Galactic Council's leader, an ancient being that looked like a floating brain in a jar, spoke in a voice that sounded like whispers. The Council has decided. The human fleet will be assigned to patrol the Kepler sector. It is a quiet area with few threats. Your ship should be safe there while our advanced fleets handle the real dangers of the galaxy. The Kepler sector was known throughout the galaxy as the place where new officers were sent to learn their jobs. It was so peaceful that most patrols there were considered vacation duty. Assigning the human fleet to the Kepler sector was another insult, a way of saying that humans were not ready for real military work. "We accept the assignment," Admiral Morrison said. He did not argue or complain. He simply nodded and began to gather his papers. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Captain Carter heard two alien officers talking near the exit. "I almost feel sorry for them," one said. "They seem so proud of their little ships." "Pride comes before the fall," the other replied. "Perhaps when they see what real space combat looks like, they will understand how foolish they have been." Captain Carter smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a predator makes when it sees prey that does not know it is being hunted. Outside the Great Hall, the human officers gathered in a smaller room. The walls were made of the same crystal as the Carillion delegates, but these crystals did not throw pretty colors. They were dark and showed only reflections. "Well, that went about as expected," Commander Walsh said. He did not sound upset or angry. He sounded like a man who had just watched his enemies make a terrible mistake. "They have no idea what our ships can really do," Lieutenant Commander Peterson added. She was looking at a small computer pad that showed technical specifications. The numbers on the screen would have been very interesting to the aliens in the Great Hall, but they had been too busy laughing to ask for details. Admiral Morrison sat down in a chair that was too small for him. Most of the furniture in the space station was built for beings smaller than humans. "How long do you think it will take?" he asked. Captain Carter checked her own computer pad. "Intelligence says the Vex-High Empire is mobilizing a large fleet. If they follow their usual patterns, they will test the outer defenses first. The Kepler sector is exactly the kind of place they would attack to see how the galaxy responds." "So we wait," Commander Walsh said. "We wait," Admiral Morrison agreed, "and when the time comes, we show them what human engineering can really do." The meeting ended, and the human officers returned to their ships. Behind them, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council continued to buzz with conversation about the primitive humans and their ancient vessels. The aliens were already planning how to divide up the territories that the human fleet would surely lose in their first real battle. None of them noticed the small smile on Admiral Morrison's face as he walked away. None of them thought to ask why humans would bring such old ships to a galactic war, and none of them wondered what modifications might be hidden inside those thick metal hulls. The greatest military surprise in galactic history was about to unfold, and it would start in the quiet, peaceful Kepler sector. 3 months had passed since the humiliating meeting at the Galactic Council. The human fleet now floated quietly in the Kepler sector, watching empty space and protecting colonies that had not seen a real threat in over 200 years. Captain Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Denver, looking out at the stars through the main viewing window. The space around them was peaceful and beautiful, with distant suns creating patterns of light against the black sky. But Carter knew that peace could end at any moment. "Another exciting day of watching nothing happen," said Lieutenant Tony Rogers from his seat at the sensor station. He was a young officer with brown hair and tired eyes. 3 months of patrol duty in the safest sector of the galaxy had made him restless. "Stay alert, Lieutenant," Captain Carter replied. "The moment we get bored is the moment something dangerous will happen." Rogers nodded but did not look convinced. Like most of the crew, he had heard the stories about the outer rim sectors where real battles happened. Pirates attacked supply ships, alien raiders struck without warning, and sometimes entire fleets would disappear without sending a single message for help. Compared to that, the Kepler sector felt like a vacation. Deep in the ship's engine room, Chief Engineer Kelly Brooks was not bored at all. She was too busy making sure that the most important secret in the human fleet kept working perfectly. The engine room looked ordinary enough, with the same kind of machinery that had powered human ships for decades. But hidden inside the familiar equipment was technology that would have shocked the aliens who had laughed at them. "Computer, run diagnostic on the hybrid drive system," Kelly said to the ship's artificial intelligence. "Diagnostic complete," the computer replied in a calm voice. "Quantum chemical fusion matrix operating at 98% efficiency. Exotic matter containment stable. All systems ready for combat operations." Kelly smiled as she read the numbers on her screens. The aliens thought human ships used simple chemical rockets, the same kind of engines that had first carried humans to their moon centuries ago. They were not completely wrong, but they were not completely right either. Human engineers had spent 50 years studying alien technology, not to copy it, but to improve their own designs. The result was a hybrid system that used chemical fuel as a base but mixed it with exotic matter that could bend the rules of physics. The engines could run silent and cold like old chemical rockets, making them nearly invisible to alien sensors. But when needed, they could produce thrust patterns that would confuse any enemy trying to predict human ship movements. On the other side of the engine room, Weapons Officer Dan Cooper was running his own secret tests. The ship's armory looked like something from an old war movie, filled with railguns and mass drivers that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. The aliens had called them primitive, and in some ways they were right. But primitive did not mean weak. "Kelly, can you give me a power reading on the kinetic artillery?" Dan asked. Kelly checked another screen. "Primary railgun is charged and ready. Projectile velocity will be 12% of light speed on maximum setting. Secondary mass drivers are loaded with the new tungsten steel rounds." Dan nodded with satisfaction. The aliens used energy shields that could stop lasers, plasma bolts, and particle beams. But those same shields were designed to deflect things that had no solid form. A chunk of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed was something completely different. It would pass through energy shields like they were not even there. But the real secret was in the metal itself. Human metallurgy had advanced far beyond what other species understood. The projectiles were not just tungsten steel. They contained microscopic computers, exotic matter cores, and small devices that could change the fundamental properties of the metal during flight. A single shot from a human railgun could punch through armor that would laugh at alien superweapons. On the bridge of the USS Phoenix, Captain Greg Martinez was reading reports from the other ships in the human fleet. All 12 vessels were spread across the Kepler sector, maintaining the boring patrol pattern that the Galactic Council had assigned to them. But Martinez knew they were doing more than just flying in circles. "Communications Officer Hayes, any word from the long-range sensor stations?" Martinez asked. "Yes, sir," replied Officer Hayes, a young woman with red hair and sharp eyes. "Station 7 reports unusual hyperspace signatures near the galactic rim. Could be merchant traffic, but the patterns are consistent with military formations." Martinez frowned. The galactic rim was where the most dangerous alien empires made their homes, too far away for the Galactic Council to control them. If military ships were moving in that area, it could mean trouble for everyone. "Send a coded message to Admiral Morrison," Martinez ordered. "Tell him we have possible fleet movements in Sector 12. A few minutes later, Martinez received a reply from the USS Denver. Admiral Morrison wanted to speak with all the human ship captains in a secure conference call. Within an hour, 12 faces appeared on Martinez's communication screen, each one showing a human captain floating in space, far from home. "I'll get straight to the point," Admiral Morrison said. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed concern. "Our intelligence sources have confirmed that the HFY Empire is mobilizing their largest fleet in over a century. We don't know their target yet, but they're moving toward the inner rim sectors." Captain Carter spoke from her position on the USS Denver. "How large is this fleet, Admiral?" "Current estimates put it at over 300 warships, including at least 50 heavy cruisers and 12 dreadnoughts. It's the largest military force anyone has seen since the last Galactic War." The other captains exchanged worried looks. The HFY Empire was known throughout the galaxy as the most dangerous military power that had ever existed. Their ships were huge, dark, and covered with weapons that could destroy entire planets. They had conquered dozens of star systems and enslaved billions of beings. Most civilized species lived in fear of the day when the Vexi would decide to expand their territory again. "Do we have any idea where they're heading?" asked Captain Brown from the USS Seattle. "Intelligence thinks they're planning to test the Galactic Council's defenses," Admiral Morrison replied. "They'll probably start with an isolated sector somewhere. They can cause damage without facing the main fleet." Captain Martinez felt a cold understanding settle in his stomach. "A sector like this one?" "Exactly," Morrison confirmed. "The Kepler sector has valuable colonies, important trade routes, and a reputation for being lightly defended. It would be the perfect place for the Vexi to announce that they're back in the conquest business." Lieutenant Commander Amy Peterson, now serving as Admiral Morrison's tactical officer, appeared on the screen next to him. "We estimate they'll arrive here within 72 hours if they maintain their current speed." The captain sat in silence for a moment, thinking about what this meant. 12 human ships against over 300 Vexi warships. By any reasonable calculation, it was not a battle. It was a massacre waiting to happen. But Captain Carter was not thinking about reasonable calculations. She was thinking about the months of preparation, the secret modifications, and the weapons that no alien had ever seen in action. "Admiral," she said, "do we retreat, or do we follow our original orders?" Morrison's face showed the hint of a smile. "Our orders were to protect this sector and its colonies. I don't see anything in those orders about running away when the enemy shows up." "What about reinforcements?" asked Captain Davis from the USS Portland. "The nearest Galactic Council fleet is 6 days away," Peterson replied. "The Zephyrians have a squadron 4 days out, but they're already engaged with pirates in the Vega system. We're on our own." Captain Martinez looked around at the faces of his fellow officers. They were all thinking the same thing. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the chance to show the galaxy what human ships could really do. But it was also very likely a suicide mission. "Gentlemen and ladies," Admiral Morrison said, "in about 3 days, we're going to face the largest invasion fleet in Vexi history. They're expecting to find a small patrol force of primitive ships with obsolete weapons. They have no idea what they're actually going to encounter." Chief Engineer Brooks appeared on Carter's part of the screen. "Admiral, all 12 ships report full combat readiness. Our special modifications are working perfectly and our crews are trained and ready." "Good," Morrison replied. "Execute Plan 7. All ships will proceed to defensive positions around the primary colony worlds. We'll let the Vexi come to us." The conference call ended, and the captains returned to preparing their ships and crews. Throughout the fleet, human officers and enlisted personnel worked with quiet efficiency, checking weapons, running system diagnostics, and making final preparations for what would either be the greatest victory or the greatest disaster in human military history. On the USS Denver, Captain Carter walked through the corridors of her ship, stopping to talk with crew members and check on their preparations. The ship felt different now, charged with tension and anticipation. Everyone knew what was coming. In the mess hall, she found a group of young officers playing cards and trying to act like nothing unusual was happening. The alarm bells rang through the USS Denver at exactly 3 in the morning, ship time. Captain Lisa Carter was already awake, sitting in her command chair and staring at the main screen. She had not been able to sleep, knowing that this moment was coming. "Captain, long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace signatures," reported Lieutenant Tony Rogers, his voice tight with tension. "The Vexi fleet is dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of our sensor range." Carter felt her heart beating faster, but her voice remained calm. "How many ships, Lieutenant?" Rogers checked his instruments twice before answering. 212 vessels confirmed. Still counting. The largest ones are bigger than anything in our database." On the main screen, tiny dots of light began to appear against the black of space. Each dot represented a Vexi warship, and there were so many of them that they looked like a swarm of angry insects. The human fleet's 12 ships seemed impossibly small by comparison. All hands to battle stations, Carter announced over the ship's communication system. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. All crew members report to emergency positions immediately. Throughout the ship, men and women ran through corridors, checking weapons, sealing blast doors, and preparing for combat. The USS Denver had drilled for this moment dozens of times, but everyone knew that real battle would be different from practice. On the bridge of the USS Phoenix, Captain Greg Martinez was coordinating with the other human ships scattered throughout the sheer Kepler sector. His communication screen showed the faces of 11 other captains, all of them trying to look confident despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Admiral Morrison, the enemy fleet is larger than we estimated, Martinez reported. We're looking at over 200 ships, including at least 15 of their super-heavy dreadnoughts. Admiral Morrison appeared on the main communication channel from his position aboard the USS Denver. His face was serious but showed no sign of fear. All captains, execute Formation Omega immediately. Activate full stealth protocols and prepare for silent running. What happened next would have confused any alien military observer. The 12 human ships simply vanished from all sensor readings. Their heat signatures dropped to nearly nothing, their energy emissions became impossible to detect, and their communication signals went completely silent. The secret was in the hybrid drive systems that Chief Engineer Kelly Brooks had spent months perfecting. While alien ships used powerful energy sources that could be detected from great distances, human ships could switch to old-fashioned chemical propulsion that produced almost no detectable emissions. Combined with special hull coatings and heat dampening systems, the human fleet became nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Lieutenant Commander Amy Peterson, serving as tactical officer aboard the USS Denver, watched the enemy fleet approach on her instruments. Admiral, they're maintaining standard attack formation. All ships are broadcasting on normal communication channels. They have no idea we're here. Good, Morrison replied. Let them get closer. Remember, they're expecting to fight Zephyrian plasma cruisers and Carillion energy destroyers. They have no idea what our weapons can actually do. The Vex-High fleet moved through space like a dark cloud of death. Their ships were massive and terrible to look at, with hulls that seemed to absorb light and weapons that glowed with menacing energy. The largest vessels were over 3 miles long, bristling with cannon ports and missile tubes. On the bridge of the Vex-High flagship, an enormous dreadnought called the Dark Conquest, Warlord Grixoth studied the tactical displays with his 6 red eyes. He was a creature of nightmare, standing 12 feet tall with armor-plated skin and claws that could cut through steel. Like all members of his species, he lived for conquest and destruction. Report, Grixoth commanded in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. His tactical officer, a smaller Vex-High with scarred faceplates, consulted his instruments. Warlord, we detect minimal energy signatures throughout the sector. The human patrol fleet appears to have fled when they detected our approach. Grixoth made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was the kind of laughter that promised pain for someone. Typical human cowardice. Their so-called warships probably broke down from fear before we even arrived. The bridge crew joined their warlord in his amusement. The Vex-High had fought many species throughout the galaxy, and they had learned to recognize the signs when an enemy had already given up. Empty space, no energy readings, and no communication traffic usually meant that the defenders had either fled or were hiding in terror. Begin bombardment of the colony worlds, Grixoth ordered. We will strip this sector of everything valuable and then move on to more challenging targets. Perhaps the humans will return with reinforcements that can provide us with some actual entertainment. The Vex-High fleet began to spread out, preparing to attack the peaceful colonies that dotted the Kepler sector. Massive siege ships moved into position to bombard planets from orbit. Fighter squadrons launched from carrier vessels, ready to strafe any ground installations that survived the initial attack. That was when the first human kinetic projectile struck the Dark Conquest. The tungsten steel round, accelerated to 15% of light speed by the USS Denver's primary railgun, hit the Vex-High flagship like the fist of an angry god. The impact created an explosion that could be seen from planets light-years away. The massive dreadnought, protected by shields that could deflect any known energy weapon, shuddered and rolled as the solid projectile punched through its defenses like they were made of paper. "What was that?" Warlord Grixoth roared, picking himself up from the deck where the impact had thrown him. "Report immediately." His tactical officer was frantically checking his instruments, but the readings made no sense. "Unknown weapon signature, Warlord. Our shields registered no energy discharge before impact. It was as if something solid struck us, but our sensors detected no incoming projectiles." Before the Vexhi could react, 11 more human ships decloaked simultaneously throughout their formation. The USS Phoenix materialized directly behind a Vexhi heavy cruiser, its mass drivers already charging for the next shot. The USS Miami appeared above a formation of destroyers, its railguns targeting their engine sections. All across the battlefield, human ships emerged from invisibility like predators springing a trap. "All ships, fire at will," Admiral Morrison commanded over the secure human communication channel. "Target their propulsion systems first. We want them dead in space before they can organize a counterattack." The human fleet opened fire with weapons that the Vexhi had never encountered before. Railgun projectiles moving at impossible speeds tore through enemy hulls. Mass driver rounds, guided by tiny computers and powered by exotic matter cores, changed direction in mid-flight to strike weak points in enemy armor. Kinetic torpedoes, looking like simple metal cylinders, penetrated deep into enemy ships before exploding with the force of nuclear weapons. Captain Martinez coordinated the attack from the USS Phoenix, his ship dancing through the enemy formation with movements that defied all known laws of space combat. The hybrid drive system allowed sudden acceleration and direction changes that no alien ship could match or predict. "Direct hit on the enemy cruiser designated Target 7, reported Weapons Officer Dan Cooper from his position on the USS Denver. "Secondary explosions detected. They're losing atmosphere and power." The Vexhi formation, designed to fight enemies with energy weapons and predictable tactics, became a death trap when faced with human kinetic bombardment. Their ships had clustered together to create overlapping shield networks. But shields meant nothing against solid projectiles. The close formation just made it easier for human gunners to hit multiple targets with each shot. Chief Engineer Kelly Brooks monitored the battle from her position in the USS Denver's engine room. "Captain, quantum destabilization torpedo ready for launch. Target locked on the enemy flagship." "Fire when ready," Captain Carter replied. The torpedo looked like nothing special, just another metal cylinder launched from the ship's kinetic weapons system. But hidden inside its simple casing was technology that combined human engineering with captured alien quantum mechanics. When it struck the Dark Conquest, it did not just explode. It created a cascading failure in the fabric of space-time itself. Warlord Grixoth watched in disbelief as sections of his flagship simply stopped existing. The quantum destabilization effect spread through the ship's hull like a disease, unmaking matter at the molecular level. Emergency alarms blared throughout the massive vessel as entire decks vanished into nothingness. "Impossible," Grixoth whispered, his red eyes wide with shock. "Their weapons are primitive. They use chemical rockets and metal bullets. This cannot be happening," but it was happening. All around the Dark Conquest, other Vexhi ships were suffering the same fate. Human kinetic weapons, dismissed as ancient and useless by every military expert in the galaxy, were tearing through the most advanced fleet ever assembled. The USS Seattle, under Captain Brown's command, had positioned itself near a group of Vexhi fighters. The small enemy craft were fast and deadly, armed with plasma cannons that could slice through most ship hulls. But their speed meant nothing when faced with weapons they could not detect until impact. The hunt through the Kepler sector lasted for 6 hours. What had started as a Vexhi invasion had turned into a desperate flight for survival, with human ships pursuing the scattered remains of the once mighty fleet, like wolves chasing wounded prey. Captain Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Denver, watching as her ship closed in on a group of Vexhi heavy cruisers that were trying to reach the hyperspace jump point at the edge of the system. The enemy ships were moving as fast as their damaged engines could carry them, but it was not fast enough. "Range to target Group Alpha?" Carter asked. 12,000 kilometers and closing," replied Lieutenant Tony Rogers from his sensor station. "They're trying to charge their hyperspace drives, but we'll be in firing range before they can jump. Carter nodded. Weapons Officer Cooper, prepare the primary railgun. Target the lead cruiser's engine section. Dan Cooper's hands moved across his control panel with practiced efficiency. Primary railgun charged and ready, Captain. Tungsten steel round loaded with quantum disruption core. Fire. The USS Denver shuddered slightly as the railgun discharged. The projectile, moving at 18% of light speed, crossed the distance between the ships in less than a second. The HFY cruiser's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, offered no protection against the solid metal round. The impact tore through the enemy ship's engine compartment like it was made of paper. Secondary explosions rippled along the cruiser's hull as power systems overloaded and fuel tanks ruptured. Within moments, the massive warship was a drifting wreck, its crew either dead or struggling to reach escape pods. Direct hit, Cooper reported. Target is dead in space. The other two cruisers in that group are changing course, trying to use the gas giant's gravity to slingshot away from us. Let them try, Carter said with cold satisfaction. Communications, signal the USS Miami. Tell Captain Rodriguez to intercept them on the far side of the planet. Throughout the system, similar scenes were playing out as the human fleet systematically hunted down the fleeing HFY ships. The aliens who had entered the Kepler sector with such confidence were now learning what it felt like to be prey. On the USS Phoenix, Captain Greg Martinez was coordinating the pursuit of the enemy's fastest ships, a squadron of HFY destroyers that were trying to escape toward the outer system. His ship's hybrid drive system allowed it to match their speed while remaining almost invisible to their sensors. Captain, we're in position, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim. The enemy destroyers are directly ahead, running silent and trying to avoid detection. Martinez smiled grimly. The HFY thought they were being clever by shutting down their active sensors and running quiet. They did not realize that human ships could track them using passive sensors that detected heat signatures and gravitational disturbances. Launch kinetic spread, full dispersal pattern, Martinez ordered. The Phoenix fired dozens of small tungsten projectiles in a wide cone, ahead of the fleeing destroyers. The rounds were not guided, but they did not need to be. At the speeds involved, even a tiny piece of metal could punch through the hull of a spaceship. The lead HFY destroyer ran straight into the kinetic spread without even knowing it was there. Multiple impacts along its hull created a chain reaction of explosions that broke the ship in half. The other destroyers, seeing their leader destroyed by invisible weapons, scattered in panic. Scratch one destroyer, reported Lieutenant Kim. The others are breaking formation and trying to escape individually. Good, Martinez replied. Signal the Seattle and Portland. Tell them to pick off the stragglers. We have bigger prey to catch. The biggest prey of all was the Dark Conquest, the HFY flagship that had limped away from the main battle with massive damage from the quantum destabilization torpedo. Warlord Grixoth's mighty dreadnought was still the most dangerous ship in the enemy fleet, but its engines were damaged, and its weapons systems were operating at reduced capacity. Admiral Morrison had taken personal command of the hunt for the flagship. The USS Denver, along with the USS Miami and USS Seattle, was closing in on the wounded giant as it tried to reach the safety of hyperspace. Admiral, the target is definitely the Dark Conquest, reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Peterson from her tactical station. Our intelligence files confirm the ship's configuration. It's the most powerful vessel in the HFY fleet. Morrison studied the tactical display showing the massive enemy ship. Even damaged, the Dark Conquest was 3 times larger than any human vessel and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But size and firepower would not save it now. Chief Brooks, what's the status of our special weapon? Morrison asked over the internal communication system. Kelly Brooks's voice came back from the engine room, slightly distorted by the exotic energies surrounding her equipment. The Quantum Lance is fully charged and ready for deployment, Admiral. This will be its first combat test. The Quantum Lance was humanity's most closely guarded secret, a weapon that combined human engineering with alien technology in ways that no other species had ever attempted. While the aliens had developed quantum weapons that could disrupt matter, at the molecular level, humans had found a way to focus that disruption into a directed beam that could cut through any known material. Target their main reactor, Morrison ordered. One shot should be enough. On the Dark Conquest, Warlord Grixoth was frantically trying to organize his remaining ships for a final counterattack. His flagship was badly damaged, but it still carried enough weapons to destroy several human vessels if he could catch them in a direct engagement. All remaining ships, form up on the flagship, he commanded over the fleet communication channel. We will make our stand here. These humans cannot have unlimited ammunition for their primitive weapons. But Grixoth was wrong about human ammunition supplies. The beauty of kinetic weapons was their simplicity. As long as a ship had power for its railguns and mass drivers, it could turn any piece of metal into a deadly projectile. The USS Denver alone carried enough raw materials to fire continuously for days. Warlord, 3 human ships approaching from multiple vectors, reported his tactical officer. They're using some kind of stealth technology. Our sensors cannot maintain a solid lock. Grixoth's 6 red eyes blazed with fury. Impossible. Their ships are primitive. They cannot have better stealth systems than we do. But the evidence was right there on his screens. The human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, never staying in one place long enough for Vex-High weapons to target them effectively. Meanwhile, their own weapons seemed to strike with perfect accuracy every time. All weapons fire at will, Grixoth ordered. Destroy everything in this sector if you have to. The Dark Conquest opened fire with every functional weapon system it possessed. Plasma cannons sent streams of superheated gas across space. Particle beam projectors fired invisible death rays that could slice through solid rock. Quantum torpedoes created small black holes that consumed everything in their path, but the human ships were simply not where the Vex-High weapons were aimed. The hybrid drive systems allowed them to change course and speed in ways that confused enemy targeting. Computers. What looked like 3 ships on Vex-High sensors was actually 12, as the human fleet used advanced electronic warfare to create false images and confuse enemy tracking systems. Admiral, we have a clear shot, reported Weapons Officer Cooper from the USS Denver. Fire the Quantum Lance, Morrison ordered. The weapon that emerged from the USS Denver's forward hull looked nothing like the alien energy weapons that the Vex-High were familiar with. Instead of a visible beam or projectile, the Quantum Lance created an invisible column of disrupted spacetime that stretched across the battlefield at the speed of light. When it struck the Dark Conquest, the effect was immediate and devastating. The quantum disruption field passed through the ship's shields and armor like they were not even there, then began to unmake the matter of the main reactor core at the atomic level. Warlord Grixoth felt his flagship shudder as something fundamental went wrong deep in its heart. Emergency alarms blared throughout the massive vessel as the main reactor began to collapse in ways that violated every known law of physics. What is happening? He demanded. But his technical officers had no answers. Their instruments were showing readings that made no sense, as if reality itself was breaking down in the reactor compartment. Warlord, we're losing main power, one of them finally managed to report. The reactor is, I don't know how to describe it. It's just disappearing. The Quantum Lance had created a cascade failure that spread throughout the Dark Conquest's power systems. As the main reactor ceased to exist, backup power sources overloaded and failed. Lights went out across the massive ship, and artificial gravity began to fluctuate wildly. All hands abandon ship, Grixoth finally ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. Evacuate immediately. But there was not enough time. The quantum disruption field was spreading through the ship's structure like a cancer, unmaking metal and flesh alike. Escape pods that managed to launch found themselves caught in the expanding field of nothingness. Admiral Morrison watched on his tactical display as the most powerful warship in Vex-High history simply faded away, piece by piece, until nothing remained but empty space where it had been. The news traveled faster than any spaceship could fly. Within hours of the Battle of Kepler Sector, every major government in the galaxy knew that something impossible had happened. The mighty Vex-High Empire, feared by civilizations across 1,000 star systems, had sent their greatest invasion fleet into human space. None of those ships had returned. At first, many alien leaders refused to believe the reports. The few HFY survivors who had escaped in damaged shuttles told stories that sounded like the ravings of traumatized minds. They spoke of human ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, of weapons that ignored all known defenses, and of their mighty flagship simply ceasing to exist. But as more details emerged, and as intelligence networks confirmed the destruction of over 200 HFY warships, the galaxy began to understand that everything had changed. The species they had mocked for using outdated technology had just accomplished the greatest military victory in recorded history. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Jake Morrison found himself once again standing in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. But this time, the atmosphere was very different. Instead of laughter and mockery, there was silence. Instead of condescending smiles, there were expressions of fear and confusion. The same alien representatives who had dismissed human ships as museum pieces now studied Admiral Morrison with nervous respect. The Zephyrian ambassador Veltash no longer made clicking sounds of amusement. His blue metallic skin seemed to have lost some of its shine, and his forearms moved restlessly, as if he could not get comfortable. "Admiral Morrison," Veltash said, his voice carefully controlled through the translator device. "The Council has reviewed the reports from the Kepler sector engagement. We find them difficult to understand." Morrison stood calmly at the center of the Great Hall, with Captain Lisa Carter beside him as before. But now, instead of holding a device that projected images of human ships, Carter carried a datapad containing battle recordings that would shock the galaxy. "What specifically do you find difficult to understand?" Morrison asked. The Carillion delegate, the crystalline being named Thexmore, rose from his seat. When he spoke, his musical voice carried none of its previous arrogance. "Your reports claim that 12 human vessels defeated a HFY invasion fleet of over 200 ships. This is mathematically impossible, given the known capabilities of your technology. Perhaps your understanding of our technology was incomplete," Captain Carter replied. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. The creature that looked like a walking tree rustled its leaves nervously. The slug-like being that had previously insulted human weapons now seemed to be trying to make itself smaller and less noticeable. Admiral Morrison activated the holographic display system in the center of the hall. Instead of showing peaceful images of human ships in dock, the display now showed battle footage from the Kepler sector engagement. The aliens watched in stunned silence as HFY dreadnoughts, ships that many of them feared more than death itself, were torn apart by weapons they could barely understand. "These are actual recordings from our ship sensors," Morrison explained, as the images played. "You can see our kinetic projectiles penetrating HFY shields and armor with no difficulty. You can observe how our stealth systems allowed us to attack without being detected. And here you can witness the complete destruction of the enemy flagship using our quantum lance technology." The hall was so quiet that the only sounds were the mechanical noises of the station's life support systems and the frightened breathing of several hundred alien beings. They watched the Dark Conquest, the most feared ship in the galaxy, simply fade away into nothingness under the influence of the human quantum weapon. The small, furry creature with too many eyes was the first to speak. "But your ships use chemical propulsion. Chemical rockets are primitive technology thousands of years old." Lieutenant Commander Amy Peterson, now promoted to commander and serving as Morrison's technical advisor, stepped forward. "Our propulsion systems do use chemical reactions as a base, but they are integrated with exotic matter manipulation and quantum field generators. The result is a hybrid system that can operate in stealth mode or provide thrust characteristics that your sensors cannot predict." "And your weapons?" asked the insect-like alien, its wings buzzing with nervousness. "You said they were kinetic. Projectiles. Simple bullets." Commander Peterson smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Our kinetic weapons use advanced metallurgy, exotic matter cores, and guidance systems that can alter the fundamental properties of the projectiles during flight. A tungsten steel round fired from our railguns has more destructive potential than most of your quantum torpedoes." The Altarian counselor, who had remained silent during the previous meeting, finally found the courage to speak. "What you are describing is impossible. If humans possessed such advanced technology, why did you present your ships as primitive relics? This time, Admiral Morrison answered, because you assumed that familiar appearance meant limited capability. You judged our technology based on what it looked like, not what it could do. That was your mistake. The truth was slowly sinking in throughout the Great Hall. The aliens had been so focused on developing exotic, energy-based technologies that they had dismissed the potential of older, more fundamental approaches. While they built ships that looked impressive and used weapons that created spectacular light shows, humans had quietly perfected systems that were efficient, reliable, and devastatingly effective. Chief Engineer Kelly Brooks, who had been invited to address the council as a technical expert, explained the philosophy behind human engineering. We believe in building things that work, not things that look advanced. Our ships may not be as pretty as yours, but they accomplish their mission better than anything else in the galaxy. But the HFY had the most powerful fleet ever assembled, protested a delegate that looked like a floating jellyfish. Their ships could destroy planets. How could your small patrol force defeat them so completely? Captain Greg Martinez, representing the USS Phoenix, answered this question. Size and raw power mean nothing if you cannot hit your target. HFY tactics were designed to fight enemies with similar technology. They had no defense against weapons and strategies they had never encountered before. The aliens were beginning to understand the magnitude of their error. By dismissing human technology as primitive, they had failed to recognize that humanity had developed completely different solutions to the same problems that other species faced. The result was a military capability that no one in the galaxy had expected or prepared for. The floating brain that led the Galactic Council finally spoke, its whisper-like voice carrying clearly through the hall's communication systems. What are humanity's intentions now? You have demonstrated military superiority that surpasses any known force in the galaxy. Admiral Morrison considered his words carefully before responding. Our intentions are the same as they have always been. We want to protect peaceful civilizations and maintain stability in the galaxy. The difference is that now we have the capability to do so effectively. And if other aggressive species threaten the peace, asked Veltash, they will face the same fate as the HFY Empire. Captain Carter answered simply. A chill seemed to settle over the Great Hall as the implications of that statement became clear. The HFY Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, no longer existed as a military force. Any other aggressive species that threatened peaceful worlds would face human ships with weapons that could not be stopped by conventional defenses. Commander Walsh, who had observed the previous meeting, in silence now stepped forward with a datapad in his hands. The Council should be aware that the ships you saw in the Kepler sector engagement represent our oldest vessel designs. We have been constructing new ships while you debated our capabilities. The holographic display changed to show images of human shipyards orbiting Earth and its colonies. Massive construction facilities were building vessels that retained the deceptive simplicity of their predecessors, but incorporated lessons learned from 50 years of galactic warfare. These new ships, Walsh continued, incorporate improvements based on our recent combat experience. They are faster, more heavily armed, and equipped with even more advanced stealth systems than the fleet that defeated the HFY. The alien representative stared at the images of sleek human dreadnoughts emerging from orbital shipyards. These ships looked more advanced than their predecessors, but they still maintained the clean, functional lines that characterized human engineering. There were no unnecessary decorations, no impressive but useless energy displays, just efficient machines designed for one purpose: victory. How many of these new ships are you building? Whispered the Carillion delegate. Enough, Admiral Morrison replied. The council session continued for several more hours, but the real business had been concluded in the first few minutes. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently, and everyone knew it. Species that had previously settled disputes through military force would now have to consider the possibility of human intervention. Pirates and raiders who had terrorized peaceful shipping lanes began to surrender to authorities rather than risk encountering human patrol ships.